Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Promised Neverland manga review. This one is going to be for chapter 178, which is called To the Human World. And this was a very interesting chapter with what they suddenly, almost out of nowhere, revealed, because we've been waiting so long for some of these things, and then this chapter just did it all, kind of, in a way. The promise has been activated. We end the chapter with the kids in the human world, and it seems like the series is just going to continue in the human world. So I don't know, we're in a weird spot now in that I'm really unclear about, like, are we just in a sort of maybe extended epilogue where we're just going to explore the human world a little bit and sort of wrap it up there, or is this actually now it is the final arc of really covering what the human world, what's going on here, what do they know about the demon world, all these sort of questions. But the main thing that this chapter is about is just making it very, very clear to you as the reader that this reward that's been teased all this time, it honestly, truly isn't as big of a deal as you think, because they reveal in this chapter that he doesn't want a reward, and the chapter really goes out of its way to double, triple, quadruple down on the idea that you're not meant to be, like, overly suspicious about this. Which, does that make it almost more suspicious? I'm not sure. And I get it, people wanted some big, fancy new plot point or thread to come up because of that. That would create a huge drama point if he did want something that required someone to sacrifice themselves. But it's almost more interesting in this way of, like, wow, that's how changing in a way the One is. You think he's just this character, but actually he shows a different side of himself here. And then because the series is still continuing, we don't know how good or bad the human world actually is. And he talks about, like, getting enjoyment out of things. So maybe he feels that, oh, we'll let them into the human world. The kids who don't know anything about the human world are suddenly in there. Let's see how they react. That's just as entertaining, perhaps. So yeah, this is one I think is best discussed as we go through it. So first page, immediately, Mujika and Sanju are here. Because, of course, if the kids are going to the human world, the queen is going to have to see them off. So it's kind of a happy reunion between Emma and Mujika, but of course it's sort of laced with a little bit of tragedy here as well, because of course Isabella just died in the last chapter, and so there's a big hug here, pretty emotional. And as we cut to the next page, we see that, okay, they've explained everything to the two of them, and she's like, I see your mother, but you're free now. You really did it. It's amazing. Congratulations. And, the kids and Emma are just kind of like, it was because of you and Sanju, because you helped us. And they're happy for the two of them, for being kind of free. Their friends won't be killed anymore, and so on. She's the queen now. She thanks them. She's grateful to them for what they did. And she just kind of notes in her head, yes, because I met Emma and her family, I was. And the idea is she sort of trails off as Sanju brings up the promise. But the idea here, I think, being that her meeting the kids, just as much as, like, them meeting her, changed things. It really highlighted that there could be an actually good dynamic between humans and demons, and it helped open the door to a more sort of peaceful ending to things. And that was really cool, of just seeing where both of these characters sort of started off with, like, Mujika's backstory, Emma just being one of the cattle children, to where they are now, the queen and sort of like the leader of the kids just about to re-enter the human world. It's an interesting highlight of just how far both characters have gone. It's an important reunion of these two. So Rei answers Sanju's question about the promise. We'll implement it tonight. And Mujika's like, good, the sooner the better. Let me see it through as a friend and as the queen. So she's here to see them off. So the kids all start asking questions at this point. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about the promise. Where do we do this? How's this going to work? And Emma's just like, oh yeah, that's right. It's below Gracefield, and so everyone's underground now. And we see that this place looks very similar to the place we saw underground at Goldie Pond. It's a floating island on golden water, just like we saw before. And there's also a stairwell that seems to just go into sort of nothingness. Again, this is the significant point here of like, it's an island, so it's just this thing. It doesn't go into anything except the, like, you know, meter or two deep that the kind of rock actually is. So it's like a stairway into nothing. So what's going on with this? And Norman answers the question. I've heard of it, the passageway the Rattray clan used to come and go as well as transport goods. Emma says, I'll use this water to tell the one that I want to implement the promise, and then we can go safely to the human world. So they're all like, what about the 7 walls? Like, do you have to go to there again to speak to him? And Emma's like, no, actually. But before she can explain that, Phil interrupts pretty seriously and says, what about the reward? The reward. Will everything be okay? You have to give a reward, right, Emma? You're going to be able to come to the human world too, right? And so this is where, like, it comes into play of, like, I think everyone knows that there is this reward, but they haven't really thought about it so much. And Phil is sort of like, he's kind of representing the fandom here at this point in time, because we've been talking about the reward every single time the promise comes up. Tell us what this is about. And so he's asking the question here of, tell me that the reward is not that you can't come to, that it's some sort of sacrifice on your part. That's exactly the question that the fandom had in terms of the obvious speculation about what the sort of negative to the promise would be. But she just smiles at him, big grin, don't worry. And what I like about this is that even though she gives what seems to be a very honest answer, just, you know, happy grin, don't worry, Phil keeps going. He's like, he's still concerned deeply about this. Like, really, you're not going to die or be forced to stay in this world or anything like that, for sure? And she just says, for sure. Me, everyone here, and the children in the other farms will all survive and won't be left behind. We can all go to the human world alive. And so Phil almost like shouts out at this point, then what was the reward? What is it? What's the price we're going to be paying to go to the human world? And obviously it's a very serious kind of, you know, very outspoken from Phil here. And all the other kids, you can see they're silent because they sort of agree with this idea of, there's no way it's this easy. We just contact the one, he activates the promise, and we're done. It can't be that simple. After how much of a struggle it was to get to this point, there's no way there's not some final, like, hurdle to overcome. So Emma flashes back to the meeting she had with the one where the promise was made, and she notes that this is what he said: the reward that I want is your family. And so in the flashback she's like, huh? And then we flash back to the present and everyone's like, what? He wants everyone? But she continues what he said. Your family is most important to you, so I want your family. But there's a problem. Your family will all go to the human world. That's the promise. So I can't have your family. So what shall we do? And he sort of thinks for a little bit and says, it's fine. This time for you, I don't need any reward. And everyone is kind of like, no way. There's no way he actually said that. And like, some of them actually accuse Emma right here of lying. There's like no freaking way that this is the case. So all of us children can go to the human world without exception and alive. It's too hard to believe. It's impossible. There's no way that there's no way there's no reward. Spill it. What's the truth? And Emma's just like, you know, waving her hands in front of her like, no, I'm being truthful here. Like, please, why are you so intense all of a sudden? And she says, that's what I thought too, but, and she continues with what he said. This is the important bit. For the last 1,000 years, you've had everything taken from you. So those 1,000 years are the price. You have entertained me in various ways, so that's enough. And they're all like, okay, really? That's it? I mean, if there's no need for a reward, that's great, but... And all of them are just kind of feeling that way of like, okay, that's kind of an explanation that you can see a god saying, I guess. And Ray is like, no, something's off. It's too good to be true. Norman says, Emma, if it's a deal that you have to sacrifice yourself, we'll just have to remain in this world. And all of them are like nodding in agreement of like, they will not let anyone do the sort of, you know, selfish sacrifice type thing. The selfless slash selfish sacrifice here. that can't happen like it sort of happened in the past. It's not happening. And she maintains her innocence of like, no, there's really nothing. And you already know how dangerous it is to stay in the demon world. It's okay now, but maybe the demons will want to eat humans again. Or there could even be demons like that one that killed Mom. Those that won't accept the farms being abolished. The farms are gone and Mujika has become queen. But no one can govern the appetite of the citizens. Because for the demons, eating humans isn't a sin or a crime. We should disappear into the human world, and as soon as possible. I'm not being sacrificed. Not just me, nobody else either. And they're all beginning to kind of come around. Like, really? Really? And she just says, really, really, it's true. And so it turns from concerned faces into cheers of applause, and you know, it's happening. Like they're all happy about this finally. Ray maintains, you know, it still doesn't make sense to me that the one could never ... And Norman says, you think they have an ulterior motive? And Emma says, I thought about that too. And it's just said here, maybe the human world isn't peaceful. Even if it is, there's still a lot we have to worry about. Are they going to accept us? And what about the seizures Norman and the others have? The future may not always bright. Okay, it may not always, I suppose that's meant to, the future may not always be bright, I suppose is what it's meant to be. So I think that's a typo. Maybe that's why there was no reward. But even if so, I want to implement this promise and go to the human world with everyone. So doubling down on that once again. And also presenting what also could be another part of why he didn't want a reward. That he just explained that he got 1,000 years of sort of enjoyment watching what happened with sort of the conflict in the demon world with what happened and the cattle children and everything that went on. The reverse of that, of like the cattle children returning to the human world and just experiencing that, is that not also something that can be enjoyable for him? So maybe that's sort of why there wasn't a reward, because he's getting just as much out of it this way as well. So that's sort of interesting to consider. But she does mention Norman and like the seizures and so on. It's a, you know, as far as we're aware, like, is it not the case that all the lambdas are meant to like die eventually from that? And that's why they're pointing out that like they still have to figure that out. That's one of the challenges, that just going to the human world doesn't solve absolutely everything, and that, you know, they don't know what the world is like. Will they be accepted? What's going to happen? How will they adapt to modern human society or whatever, and so on. But she continues and says, because I know I can get over any worries or challenges as long as I'm with you guys. And everyone begins to smile. We can work to create a brighter future. Let's go. So everyone cheers. She puts the special flower into the kind of jar with some of the water. And this, she takes kind of Phil's hand, and this sort of activates the connection here. So it's just interesting dynamic where, like, I suppose the one sort of like kind of speaks through the dimensions, or whatever way you want to call it, from the seven walls or whatever, and he just says, ready. And she says, yeah, we're ready. And so what he does is he reaches his hand out, gets some of this special, you know, golden water kind of spiraling, and it starts moving around all over the place. Everyone is shocked that like this is happening, and yeah, it seems like the it's kind of hard to exactly make out what exactly happens, but it looks like the stairs, the island that has the stairwell on it, sort of raises out of the ground, and then the staircase just like projects basically out of it. It just extends all over the place. The water is like sprayed all across the air. It's this crazy kind of staircase that's now developed that they're seeing. So Emma, kind of about to leave, says, bye, thanks Mujika, Sanju. And they're just like, yeah, good luck. And she, Mujika in her head notes, I'm so glad I met you, Emma. I'll never forget you. Even if we live in different worlds, we'll always be friends. As you get a nice kind of look and wave between the two of them as they say goodbye. the others wave as they kind of are about to, disappear, transfer into the other world. We cut to, I suppose, some of the other farms, including, I suppose, the mass production facilities of like those kids also being sort of like teleported away. We see, I suppose, some of the other farms with the kids, they're also teleported away, just highlighting that it's not just the people here, like our group that we were with, it is actually everyone, as the promise said. So yeah, we get a kind of like, I suppose, the last splash of the water, and then we cut to the last page where we see what I guess is the Statue of Liberty. I'm not exactly sure. Like, I guess it is actually, would have to be probably, because they seem to be going, based on the few images of the human world we saw from before, that it is fairly accurate to actual, like, real life human world. But last two panels are, we see Phil, I think it looks like Ray, potentially Norman, Anna, maybe Don are the five that I think we see on that page, kind of washed up on the shore, it almost looks like. And then we see sort of Phil begin to wake up by just saying kind of like as he's about to wake up. But I suppose the tease here is maybe like, why are we focusing on Phil and not Emma, given that Phil was the one to first bring up the idea of, please tell us, Emma, that you're not sacrificing yourself in all of this. Now, it is interesting that they did show flashback panels of the one apparently saying this, and not just like Emma like quoting what he said. We actually saw him say this, so they could still reverse on that, of course, if they wanted to. But I'm wondering if perhaps what the maybe slight twist in all of this is that, okay, all the kids are back in the human world now, but who said they'd all be back in the same location all together? Maybe the groups are scattered, like, to completely different countries or whatever, and maybe the last arc is about kind of finding each other again, or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, because whatever happens next is just, I suppose, utterly unclear. Like, we just have no real sense about what's going to happen next. Of like I assume they're going to like all wake up and just see this city that they've washed up next to, and see lots of humans around, and realize that this is what a modern human city is, and we'll see how they react to it. The question obviously is like, how much does the human world know, if anything, about the demon world and like who they are and stuff like that, because all the kids, of course, are still going to have the numbers from the farms on their necks, and or wherever. So will anyone kind of notice that as a specific thing? The fact that most of the kids are like wearing the exact same clothes and so on, especially like wherever the kids from the mass production facilities, who like have like no like personality or consciousness or kind of anything like that, they're literally just grown humans, like there's nothing to them. What's going to happen to them necessarily? There's a lot of questions here, in the sense of like, do they all just go to like an orphanage or something like that? Because it feels like, in a way, like if there's anything that's going to happen as a way to like end the series, it is this group all still living together, but in the human world, like, but still as a family, and doing, I suppose, the idea of what we had initially of just a group for all these kids, regardless of who their birth parents are, and this is a house for those type of people. Is that the direction that they're going in? Again, it's so interesting, I think, where the series is at this point, because they could do anything. They could reveal there's some giant conspiracy going on in the human world, and now our characters have to solve that, and it's a whole massive arc in the human world. Similarly, we could have less than like 5-10 chapters left, and we could be done within the next month or two. I really don't have too much speculation on where we're going. I think it is interesting, like there's no break or anything like that. There is a chapter next week, so I suppose we'll get some resolution to this fairly quickly. But I suppose the one maybe suspicious thing is that they do end on Phil, and they don't immediately show Emma anywhere. So, maybe that's just like a tease for the fandom, that they just happen to focus on Phil. But it's maybe a little bit too specific and suspicious given the Phil-Emma dynamic in this chapter. But yeah, overall, like, I actually quite enjoyed this. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there in the fandom for this this series who kind of, you know, on Reddit and stuff like that will say that, like, oh, every chapter is getting worse and worse. The series isn't what it once was. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there's definitely moments where they maybe accelerate through the plot a little too quickly, but I also can appreciate a show having a brisk pace and not just, you know, spending so long on this specific point. And that, like, I like how we are sort of jumping from kind of bit to bit to kind of get to where we need to, in that there's still time for us to do more, and they're, you know, giving themselves room to hit these points without leaving them out in the open for like too long. Is it like perfect? No, not really, but I still think it's like fun and entertaining. Like, there's a lot to speculate about as each week goes by and each chapter happens. There are twists and turns along the way, and they've done a good job, I feel, at choosing when to, like, actually do a twist, and then when you think they're doing a twist, maybe not do one, and that is the twist. Whereas maybe before, there was a little bit of a pattern to it all, of like, you expect there'll be 5 counter twists before the thing actually comes to an end. So, you know, I definitely enjoyed the chapter of just the focus on Mujika and Emma, like, and the goodbyes between the two of them. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing, in terms of, like, that doesn't necessarily feel like that's the last time they'll see each other. So the question is going to be, I think, do they realize that the human world isn't like the best things could be, and that they need to pursue some sort of a balance between humans and demons? That, to me, maybe feels like a goal. If there is a big goal left in the series, that's maybe something to accomplish. Because the one thing I'll maybe be a little bit like, that was an interesting thing for Emma to say, of like, where was it? Yeah, like, when she talks about the world and like, it's okay now, but maybe the demons will want to eat humans again, and like, she kind of notes that we have to get out of here as soon as possible, like, to allow Mujika as the queen to like do things. That kind of feels like, that's not as optimistic as I'd maybe think for Emma. That's kind of, you know, interesting. She accepts that logic of, like, for them, like, it's just food. Humans are just food, and it'll take a while before that view changes, now that they don't need to eat humans. And I suppose just, yeah, they need their time in the human world, but maybe they'll realize that rather than having 2 separate worlds, half and half, together as one, there's some balance to be found. I'm not sure, though, and I think that's what's interesting about the series. You don't know exactly what approach they're going to take. But yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. What were your thoughts on them just almost out of nowhere being like, here's the promise, here's the one, real surprises with how they did it, we're in the human world, what's next? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.